So right now we are dealing with a pandemic. We are dealing with the coronavirus, and our bubble is popping. Our comfortable lifestyles, we are seeing them shatter. The mentality that we've had for decades of, oh, I'll just go get some sushi. Now it's, I'm getting an Uber. After I, enjoy this nightclub, get myself an Uber and go home drunk because I won't be able to drive. This mentality of excessive comfort is crumbling, which means that the political order that we have been so used to since the Second World War is also disintegrating. It's also crumbling. Because when you have disasters like this, you have political change. When you have a situation where the life that you have been so used to for so many decades, not just you, but your parents also, the life that you have been so used to, you, your parents, and your grandparents, because your great-grandparents, they went through the Spanish flu, so they understand this, if they're still alive. But this life that we're so used to, when it's being forced to endure something, to endure such a shift in the order, such a dramatic change to the point where entire counties in the US are saying to people, stay home between these times, stay home within this duration. If we find you, we're going to find you. That makes us change our very souls, our very mental constitution. The whole thing warps. The whole thing warps very dramatically. It shifts very dramatically and violently. And from that, what emanates from that is a dramatic change in the political system, in the political order. And this is one of the ultimate dangers of this coronavirus crisis, this coronavirus situation. Just recently, I heard about a construction worker in my area who was driving around in a pickup truck, and because he had his tool shed on his pickup truck, a police officer stopped him and said, "Hey, what are you doing with that tool shed? What are you doing with that those tools? You going to work? Don't you understand we're in a coronavirus crisis here?" And he got fined like $120. In the state of Texas, in Cameron County, they put up a curfew. If you are found within the time frame of between, I want to say 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., and you don't have a good reason to be outside, like you have to go to work, or you're going to the grocery store, or you have to go to the emergency room, you're going to be fined up to $1,000, and you may see jail time. Restaurants are closed except for drive-thrus and fast food restaurants, but that may soon come to an end. Theaters closed. Schools all the way up from elementary school to universities closed. Go to grocery stores. You're so used to, for all these years, you walk into the grocery store, you find the milk, you find the eggs, you find the sugar. That's gone. Hard to find eggs, hard to find sugar. Hard to find canned tuna, hard to find canned tomato sauce, pasta. All these things are difficult to find. Our entire world, the way we have known it for all of these decades, is changing. It's an exciting time to be alive. At the same time, it's scary. In that sense, it's a bittersweet existence that we are living right now. Because we are seeing a transition into a new zeitgeist. Ever since the end of the Second World War, we have been used to a certain lifestyle, a lifestyle of prosperity. But that is coming to an end. And this coronavirus situation is a reflection of that transition. I'm not saying it's going to be the transition, but it's a part of it. If not, it is the transition. It is accelerating us into something else, into something new politically. We can't, when we look at a situation like a virus, we can't just talk about the virus and the chance of being infected. We have to talk about the political consequences. What are the political results of this sort of situation? One thing that I have known for quite some time now is that one thing that preceded the Protestant Revolution, or what is known as the Protestant Reformation, was a plague. Now, I'm not saying that there was a plague right before the time that Martin Luther was born, but in the first half of the 15th century, there was a plague. It was pretty damn deadly. And that plague killed countless people in Europe. Martin Luther, well, he started the Reformation in the first half of the 1500s. There was another thing that happened before the Protestant Reformation, and that was the Western Schism. So you had the Avignon papacy, in which people were told that the Vatican is now in France. A whole new political order changed. And then once that was settled, there were a number of people saying, I'm the Pope. And that caused a huge factionalism in Europe. And so there was an entire generation of Europeans who never saw a united church. And there was also entire generations of Europeans who had to endure through a plague. Because that plague lasted a long time, and it came up in intervals. It would pop up and then it would disappear. It would pop up and it would disappear. And this went on for centuries. But in the first half of the 1400s, there was a vicious plague. And also there was the Western Schism, in which you had an extremely corrupt ecclesiastical establishment to the point where you couldn't even know who the Pope was, because there was a competition between two people, both saying that they were the Pope. So by the time that settled, it's like, well, why the hell should we follow you? And before the Reformation, you had the PreReformation. You had the rise of the Hussites. And the Hussites, they popped up also in the 1400s. So the plague, ecclesiastical factionalism, people not even knowing who the sole Pope is, who's the successor of the keys and the seat of Peter. You have all sorts of problems because you have deadly plague, religious confusion, and with that you have political chaos. You have changes in the political order. Now, the Hussites were regionalist. They believed that the true church, they believed that the true church could be found in Bohemia, which if you try to find it in a map today, it would be located in pretty much present-day Czech Republic. Some parts of Germany, but the Czech Republic mainly. What did the plague cause? How did the plague change Europeans politically? Hilaire Belloc talks about this in his History on the Reformation. I believe the name of the book is How the Reformation Really Happened. In the beginning of this book, he talks about the plague and the political effects of the plague. And he says that what the plague did was it changed how people traveled. Before the plague struck at this time, people traveled to and fro within the European continent. Nobody was worrying about a plague. Then the plague hits, early 1400s. And you have people isolating themselves within certain regions, within their own particular regions, and people become more regionalistic. So instead of having a view of Christendom as a whole, it becomes regional. And again, within the time of the plague, you also have the Western Schism. And before the Western Schism, you have the Avignon papacy. All sorts of political religious factionalism going on. What does that cause? Causes contempt for the church. Why am I following some guy in Italy? They don't even know where their real pope is. They're confused about where the headquarters of the church is. Why should we follow all that stuff? Then you have a plague. People remain isolated within their own areas. People isolate themselves during plagues, during viruses and all these things. Sir Isaac Newton was in Trinity College when the plague struck. Sir Isaac Newton, and there was not this particular plague, but there was a plague that hit England in the lifetime of Sir Isaac Newton. And what did Isaac Newton do? He went and moved back to Mom's place because Mom, Isaac Newton's mother, she lived in a village, in a farming area. Isaac Newton went to the countryside. People isolate themselves. Shakespeare isolated himself during the plague that he lived through. Boccaccio, the Renaissance Italian writer, he talks about the plague in his time and how hundreds of people would die every single day in Italy because of the plague. And he has this story, I think it's called the demarcation, but he talks about how it's a fictional story, but it takes place within the time of the plague, and it's about a bunch of rich kids who go up to the mountains to escape the plague. And even though that story is a fiction, it reflects what people were doing, because Boccaccio, in the beginning of his book, he talks about how people isolated themselves during the plague. And he says the way that people survived was that they simply went into their homes. They had a bunch of food stored up. They also had gardens, important to garden. And whatever they had growing on their lands, whatever food they had in their pantries, they lived off of it. Nobody came into the house, nobody left. That's how they survived. So people in those days, they understood what to do. You isolate yourself. So during these plagues, people became regionalists. They stayed within their own areas, stayed within their own villages. So the idea of the universal church started to become quite vague to them. People became more regionally focused. And so that's one of the reasons why you have something called the Hussite movement, because the Hussites were people who, while they were a religious movement, they were also separatists. They wanted to split Bohemia from the Holy Catholic Roman Empire, because they didn't care so much about the universal church in those days. They wanted to be separate. They wanted their own religious utopia. And what do you have by the time you come to Martin Luther? You have people saying, well, we need a church of this principality. We need a church for the Germans. We need a church for the English. We need a church for the French. The Huguenots, they were French Calvinists. So with plagues, you also have a change of the political order. This is going to be kind of a long video. If you don't like it, go watch some podcast, which is also very long. So with plagues, with crises, you have change in the political order and the political establishment. And there are two things that preceded the Protestant Revolution. Not only was there plague, but there was also ecclesiastical or religious corruption in the Catholic Church. What do we have now? We have a people who greatly despise the church because of the pedophilia and the pederastry that has been going on, and now you also have plague. There's going to be a radical political change. And it may not come from this coronavirus. It may partially come from this coronavirus because we're already seeing it. We're experiencing something we've never experienced before. But we are going to have a greater pandemic than what we're experiencing now. And that's going to accelerate things further into a transition into a new political zeitgeist. So what could happen from this virus? Well, it's actually very simple. What's happening now? People are quarantining themselves. They're staying home. They're hamster shopping and they're staying at home. They're not working, which means that the government is going to have to give free money to these people because they're not working. And that is going to change the dialogue on socialism, even if this is not socialism. It's going to change the dialogue on it. Andrew Yang was mocked for saying that he wanted to give every American $1,000 a month. Oh, he's a socialist. Right? It is socialistic. That is true. But now the Trump administration is talking about giving $1,200 to every American, or every American that files for that money. What's that going to do? It's going to diminish the American economy. It's going to damage the American economy, and we are going to face a depression, which means people are going to talk about introducing changes and altering the political order. They're going to say, well, we faced the virus, and what helped us Americans was the government giving us some assistance, some financial assistance. And they're going to say, well, the Trump administration gave me that money. It saved my life, saved my family's life. I needed that extra $1,200. I needed that income. It saved me. I bought some food with that. And most likely Trump is going to win again. So they're going to say, well, if the Trump administration did it, and it worked, and it helped a lot of people, then we need to change our perspective on socialism, on democratic socialism. We're going to change our perspective on, the idea of having a social safety net. It's going to alter the political dialogue. Now, there's going to be two different camps. And the reason why I say this so emphatically is because we've always seen these two camps, the left-wing camp and the right-wing camp. You're going to have the left-wing camp saying, well, we need left-wing socialism. And there are leftists on the internet saying, hey, I hate Donald Trump, but he's right about giving Americans free money. Because to them, it's an incremental step towards socialism. So you're going to have people saying, we need left-wing socialism. And then you're going to have people saying, and you already have people saying things like this, you're going to have people saying, well, the reason why we got this coronavirus is because of immigration and because of globalization. And they are already right-wingers saying that this coronavirus could lead to the death of globalization. They're going to say, well, the reason why we got this coronavirus is because of all of the internationalism, people from China coming here. We need to watch Americans. We need to look after our people first, Americans first. And so you're going to have a spike in nationalism. And they're going to say, well, Trump gave all that free money away and it really helped us. We need some nationalism and we need some socialism. Put those two words together, national socialism. So the idea of nationalistic socialism is going to become popular. And I'm not saying that America is going to become the Third Reich, but what I am saying is that you are going to see more of a positive view towards these sort of ideas, be it in left-wing circles and right-wing circles. And in Europe, you're going to see anti-immigration sentiment intensify. You're already seeing Viktor Orban blaming immigration on the immigration on the coronavirus. People in France, the identitarians, they've all been talking about this. And you have Nigel Farage saying, we need to change our view on our relationship with China, because the English say China, they don't say China. And we're also seeing a spike in anti-Chinese stigma, anti-Chinese sentiment. There was actually an article that was posted on KUT 90.5. And it says here, it talks about a story about a Korean American by the name of Lang Nguyen, who is a veteran who fought in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He was harassed by a woman as he was going to vote. And he was in Irving. And he was going to go vote, and he was waiting in line to vote, and some woman in front of him turns around and says that if you're going to be sick, you might want to stay home. And Mr. Nguyen assured her that he did not have coronavirus, and she said, all you Asian people are spreading that coronavirus, and so forth. And then after Nguyen voted, he went to the parking lot to get into his car, and a police officer stopped him and asked for his identification. And he said, hey, looked like that lady was threatened by you, so I want to see some ID. And Nguyen assured the police officer that he does not have coronavirus. He was not going to assault this woman, because the cop said it looked like you were going to physically attack this lady. He said, no, I wasn't going to attack this lady. In fact, I'm a veteran. I fought for this country. I fought in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And the police officer was so touched by this that he kind of gave a verbal lashing at this lady and said, hey, don't harass this guy. Trump is saying that this is the Chinese virus. Why is he saying that? Because China, frankly, is in our shit list. And so we, to use the Machiavellian saying, never allow a good crisis to go to waste. So this is a crisis that we're living in, and this is our chance to bash the Chinese. And the Trump administration, as we know, has never missed an opportunity to bash China. Well, you have a virus that is taking over the world, and its country of origin just so happens to be China. What do you think America's going to do? Trump is going to call it the Chinese virus. And they're going to say, oh, it's the Chinese virus. Those Chinese people are ruining us. And they're going to use this to bash immigration. They're going to use this to bash migrants. They're going to say the Mexicans are going to bring it. The Guatemalans are going to bring it, blah, blah, blah. We need to destroy globalization. It's the globalists that caused all of this. So you're going to see the rise of two things. Left-wing, fanatic, socialistic ideologies, and also nationalistic and also socialistic ideologies. We have to help our people first. Welfare for our people, not foreigners, because they brought this damn disease over. So, and I'm not saying that coronavirus is going to bring us into, a global nationalistic phenomena, but it sure as hell is helping it. And it sure as hell is accelerating it. Because we're today, we are experiencing something we've never experienced before. Our parents never experienced this, and our grandparents never experienced this. Our great-grandparents experienced this. And so with such a violent shift into something different, we are going to see a violent shift in how we see politics. And so what we are seeing is an acceleration to a new political order. And that, to me, is scarier than a virus. Because a virus you can manage. Let's say all people are peaceful, all people are cool, right? No one's killing each other for food. No one's going to try to loot their neighbor, right? Let's say that that's the case in a perfect world. But all we have to do is worry about a virus. We can manage it. Everyone stay home. Don't have to go to work. If you need help, there are organizations and government programs that will help you. We will manage this. We are Americans. And by the way, Trump had the opportunity to make that victory speech, but he didn't. When a reporter said, "What do you tell Americans that are scared?" And he said, you're a bad reporter. You're a horrible reporter. It's like, Trump, this is not 2015. This is not 2016. You can't troll your way out of this. He had that opportunity to give that speech. Like, we are Americans. We can manage this. We went through World War II. We went through the Spanish epidemic, the Spanish flu. We went through all that stuff. He didn't take that opportunity. Instead, he decided to troll the reporter, probably because he thinks that, well, Americans that love him, that worship him, are going to be like, ha, 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 fake news. But we can manage it. If people are cool, we can manage this. We can really manage this. People will die, but we can manage it. People in battles die, but armies, generals, manage through those things, manage through those turbulent and morbid situations. But let's say people aren't cool, which they're not. People are violent. People are unprepared. People are selfish. People who have not prepared will rob their neighbors. Now you have to worry about people. See, because if you stay home and isolate yourself, you're not going to get infected. You got enough food, you garden, everything's cool. You may be even able to help each other out. But if you're prepared and you're staying home and a bunch of assholes around you aren't prepared, now what? Now you don't have to just worry about a virus. You have to worry about people. That's why I say people are worse than viruses. Worrying about people is a much greater burden than worrying about a virus. I remember about 2 years ago, I wrote an article about a group of paramilitaries, neo-Nazi paramilitaries, in the state of New York and the state of Virginia. And these guys are Nazis. They call themselves the Werewolf Brigade. And they are part of a cult called Operation Werewolf. And for many years, they have been promoting survivalism. Survivalism for the tribe, which means white people, right? White people who are ideologically associated with them. And they have the Slavic swastika tattoo, the kolovrat, they'll have actual swastikas, they'll have all these things. They're absolute Nazis. And I remember when I wrote this article, I showed a clip from one of their leaders. His name is Jack Donovan. Jack Donovan made a speech back in, I want to say 2017 in Germany, talking to a bunch of neo-Nazis who call themselves identitarians. Identitarians are one of the groups of people in Europe who are currently bashing the migrants and trying to foment anti-immigration sentiment. And Jack Donovan said in his conference to the identitarians, he said that violence against people who are not your people is okay, as long as you can get away with it, and as long as it has an efficacious reason, then go ahead and do it. And if you study these Operation Werewolf militants, they like to talk about preparing for a great crisis, preparing for an emergency situation. And so they talk about, storing food, canning food, jarring food, things that I myself promote. But they also train in paramilitary activities, paramilitary training with guns and knives and things like that. And it makes you wonder, what type of chaos are we going to see when the shit really hits the fan? One thing that this crisis reveals, or one thing that a crisis like this reveals, is the worst of people and the best of people. You will see, and if this pandemic gets really, really bad, you will see pure, beautiful humanity. You will see people helping one another. You will see things like that, just like we saw in the Houston flood situation. But you will also see the worst of people. And those neo-Nazi paramilitaries, they may be waiting for an opportunity to reveal the ugliest side of humanity. Anyway, stay fat, my friends. Stay healthy and stay safe. Store up food, flour, canned food, dried beans, and garden. And God willing, we'll get through this.